Now, the Russians have just hit a new low. Even I didn't think that they would hit the low that they've just hit. And I'm going to show you a number of things in a row. And the first few things aren't even it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So Russia's refused a ceasefire for 100 days now and continues to escalate says Ukrainian Foreign Minister Sabia. Okay, so it's 100 days. The Ukrainians accepted. The Russians has said they accepted, and then they didn't actually do anything with it. And here we are still. But that's not it. And it's not this either. Even though I talked about this morning, last night, Putin met with the heads of major international news agencies. And in the interview, he claimed that June 17th, the missile attack on Kyiv, which you saw the destroyed building, he said they were targeting factories producing military equipment, not residential areas, even though every journalist in the free world who decided to go and show up in Kyiv could see that that's not what it was. It was actually civilian apartment building. But that's not the new low. North Korea will send 25,000 more workers to a Russian drone factory to gain experience, UAV experience. Now, they're working with essentially slave labor. If you get a chance to see North Korea's Secret Slaves, Dollar Heroes, this documentary, yeah, the North Koreans will send these guys there and then they'll take their wages, whatever they earn, and it'll go right to Kim. And if they try to run away, they'll kill their family. So that's pretty shady. So they're essentially going to be using slave labor for this. That's not the new low. Russians openly bragging about kidnapping Ukrainian kids and trafficking them into Russia. This is still going on. Every government pumping cash or trade into the Kremlin is complicit. You're funding war crimes. And we'll talk more about that and what's going on with that and how that's being done right now. But that's not the new low. Okay. Ukraine and Russia exchanged seriously ill and wounded prisoners of war. That's prisoners of war on POWs on 19 June. This exchange is a result of an agreement reached in Istanbul, negotiations on the 2nd of June. The exact number of prisoners released was not disclosed. Many Ukrainian defenders returned home after more than 3 years in captivity. Ukrainian POWs held in Russian captivity are subjected to systematic and widespread including electric shocks and sexual violence, denial of medical care, but that's not even a new low. So these defenders are home, and that's great. I'm glad to see that, but that's not what we're talking about. And look at the contrast, how well-fed the Russian POWs are. Russians released footage of their soldiers returning from captivity, well-fed and energetic. They quickly boarded the bus. Well, they're probably also heading to the front line, so it's kind of a bad scene for them. But like, look at that and then contrast that with the Ukrainian defenders who look like they aged 20 years and lost 50 or 70 pounds each, right? That's not the new low. Here's a new low. Well, no, this isn't it. This is not the new low either. Russian Z-Rapper. I just keep going on and on and on. I feel like if I just keep drilling far enough, I'll hit it. Give it a second. Russian Z-Rapper films music video with explosives in ruined town. The locals are outraged. In Sutsa, Kursk region, Z-Rapper Nevsky filmed a music video using pyrotechnics and explosives amid the rubble of a destroyed residential building, while locals are still banned from returning due to military restrictions. Yeah, he's out here rapping and things are going off in the background and right? Okay, that's not even it. Okay. Russia's used over 6,900 chemical weapons against Ukraine. Is that the new low? That's not even it. 6,900 chemical weapons against Ukraine in just 2 years. These are systemic violations of international law, contaminate soil, water, air, leaving long-term damage to agriculture and livestock in frontline regions. For Ukraine, where farming is a cornerstone of the economy, that impact is devastating. 715 chemical attacks this May alone. Look, I'm 4 minutes plus in, and we haven't even gotten to the new low because I keep cataloging the other things. Okay, here it is. Russia's now mixing the corpses of dead Russians and body parts of dead Russians with returned fallen Ukrainians when doing repatriation exchanges in effort to boost numbers. What? Okay, so they're returning the dead Ukrainian soldiers and repatriating them, and they're mixing in some of their own Russians in order to like add to the numbers, maybe hide some of their own body parts, whatever. That this is a statement from the Interior Minister. I can't even believe. And these were the same Russians that were also saying just last week, Ukraine doesn't want to take them back because they'll have to pay this cost. Like, yeah, it is like buying each repatriated fallen soldier, the family gets the equivalent of like the payment for a whole house. I mean, that's like what it translates to, right? Okay. It's like the American statement, you bought the farm, okay, back in World War II. Okay. So here's the statement. Cynicism without limits. Russia is turning the repatriation of bodies of the dead into a tool of manipulation and pressure. The enemy is deliberately making identification difficult for us, creating chaos, mixing the bodies of Russian soldiers with the bodies of Ukrainians. Yes, we have the facts. We have established names of these unnecessary relatives of soldiers and officers. For example, corpse number 19225, dressed in the uniform of the Russian armed forces. He has a passport of a citizen of the Russian Federation, military ID card, a certificate, serviceman number 1252, extracts from the order of the commander of military unit 52, dated 12/26/23, a badge with the inspection, Russian armed forces, MT, whatever the number is. The person has been identified as, and so it goes on. This is another example of how Russia treats its own people with contempt, dumping their bodies alongside those of Ukrainian soldiers. This is evidence of how insignificant human life is to Russia. I think that seems pretty fair. It's just like, how could the way that you even think of human life, it's just, wow, just amazing. Here's the dog tag for the person. Okay, so that's where the Russians are. Now, let's look over and talk about what's going on with Europe, and then we'll look at North America and what's going on here. Okay, Poland's Electoral Commission has said that there were major irregularities in the second round of the recent presidential election, won narrowly by Naraki. Votes appear to have been recorded wrongly or transferred to the wrong candidate. I don't have any more information than that, but we'll keep an eye on that particular story. Meanwhile, Finland has voted to exit global ban on anti-personnel mines. This following Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and Poland, and now Finland has taken steps to leave the Ottawa Convention. The thing that all these countries have in common is bordering Russia in one way or another. Everyone, nobody's worried about the Norwegians, right? That's not what's causing this. It's the Russians. The delusions stem from significant security concerns, especially related to Russia's use of landmines in Ukraine. Many EU states believe that they need to restore the option of stockpiling and deploying landmines along vulnerable borders. So when they thought that everything was peaceful, sure, easy to sign on. But now that Russia's a real threat to them and they realize something very bad could go down, they're getting out of that convention. All right. So, but they're also getting off all Russian oil and gas, right? Not exactly. 3 years into EU gas bills feeding Russian war crimes, Brussels designed a new ban to starve Putin's war chest. Kind of. And it gave its traders a legal way to fund Russian missiles for 1,000 more days. Here's what's actually happened. Here is the article in Euromaidan Press. And for years, gas has flowed through Turkish and European intermediaries, disguising its origin through paper transactions. Under Article 7, the shell game ends. Okay, a little bit more down here. Market purchases of Russian gas and LNG trades that could replace literally overnight won't be banned until 17 June 2026. And then if you go up a little bit, here's a number that should make every European's blood run cold: 30 billion euros. That's how much more money the European Union plans to send Vladimir Putin for gas over the next 2.5 years, while children are buried under rubble from Russian missiles. 17 June, the European Commission finally presented its long-awaited legal proposal to phase out fossil fuel imports from Russia. You might expect this regulation to immediately stop the flow of euros to Moscow's war chest. You'd be wrong. It's a 2.5-year grace period, or as they put here, disgrace period. The math is obscene. Over the first 4 months in 2025 alone, EU member states imported Russian gas worth more than $5 billion, a 17% increase from the same period in 2024. That's where Europe is right now, and it's very sad to see. The EU plans to also boost Ukraine by moving nearly $200 billion of frozen Russian assets into riskier investments. So this is what they're trying to do that's positive. It's a little riskier, but I get what they're trying to do, aiming to increase returns without touching the principal, avoiding legal challenges while funding Ukraine amid ongoing conflict and budget strains. I don't know what more will come of this, or what happens if they lose it because it was a riskier investment or anything like that. That's all an open question. But that was the upside. Here's the downside. On July 31st, Europe could hand over $210 billion to Vladimir Putin. Yeah, you read that right. Frozen Russian assets meant to hold Kremlin accountable for invading Ukraine could go back to Moscow, and the clock's ticking. That is because the Europeans have to have a unanimous vote in the EU to continue to freeze this for another 6 months. And without that unanimous vote, and remember, Orban's there, they would have to return that legally to Russia. Putin's world continues to crumble as new polls predict that Hungary's Russian-backed Orban regime may face devastating electoral losses. Yes, but there's a but. And while at that same time, Hungary officially becomes the poorest nation in the EU, which is why what's happening to Orban right now is happening. So because it's the poorest nation, because of all the troubles that it's having, Putin's in trouble as new polling data predicts devastating losses for Hungary's Russian-backed Orban regime. So a new poll released on June 18th, there's a staggering 15-point lead over Fidesz by the TISA party that's over Orban's party. Hungary's economy has stalled, weighed down by high inflation, sluggish industrial output, and while Fidesz still enjoys support from the Hungarian diaspora, like places like Transylvania and others, its domestic base is crumbling, and with it, Russia's most reliable proxy in the EU on the verge of collapse. So, so Orban will be out, right? Perhaps, but in April of 2026, and we're looking at a July deadline for that vote about those Russian assets. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. I think the Europeans are going to really work to try to squeeze Orban to make sure that he keeps this in line, but he's going to try to get some concessions out of them this time, and then 6 months from now, he'll do it again. So that's where we are. Now, let's turn our attention to the United States. The Senate freezes new Russian sanctions as Israel-Iran war grabs Washington's attention. Okay, I told you that was what's going to happen in the short term, that short term, it's distracting us away from Ukraine over toward something else, Israel and or Iran. Senator Lindsey Graham admits the crackdown on Putin will have to wait, and there's no timeline given for that. Great. Okay, meanwhile, European leaders who visited Kyiv and tell Russia 30-day ceasefire now or face massive sanctions. Well, that was on May 10th. Remember that? And we were like, yeah, all right, the dream team, they're all there. They're around them. Okay, well, nothing has happened, but it's not as bad as what it could be. Remember, Europe is really strong if it can simply be united. Here's Ben Hodges talking about it. Europe is itself a superpower and should quit whining and act like a superpower. If you combine the economies of the UK, Norway, and the EU, you dwarf Russia. This is General Ben Hodges on the disparity between Russia's defense spending and Europe's. All right, now let's go for real to the United States. Trump left the G7 early, frustrated with French President Macron and unwilling to meet with Zelensky, according to the Financial Times. Now, he also left apparently because he had some data that maybe the Iranians might be targeting American bases. That's another report involved. We don't know exactly what's going on. I'll do a separate video just about Iran and Israel. And I do that because I know that not all of you want to see Iran and Israel. And I like hamburgers and I like sushi, but if I come for hamburgers, I want hamburgers. I don't want sushi, or vice versa. And so I'll let you decide if you want to come for the sushi on top of the hamburgers later on. Okay. NATO is now shortening the upcoming summit in The Hague to one session to prevent another early Trump exit. It's weird. That's really weird. It's like dancing around your crazy uncle, trying not to upset him at Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, that's what's going on. Okay. Darth Putin, it annoys my trolls to be told that Russia attacked Ukraine every single day Donald was president the first time, and every single day he's been president the second time. He's actually one of the constant facts of my invasion. Well, I mean, when you think about it like that, I mean, it's hard to argue with. Okay. Tucker Carlson was interviewing Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is a Republican senator from Texas, and they got into it. I mean, they got into some fighting. Cruz was asking, why are you so invested in defending Russia? Here it is.
Material effect that helped the United States. Russia is backstopped by China, and I recommend that you go there and see it. It is way nicer than Washington, D.C. Way nicer.
I don't understand. For some reason, you are really invested in defending Russia. And I don't get that. I'm not attacking you with that. I'm genuinely like, I don't get why you're so passionate about defending Russia.
Yeah, I mean, he is really invested and passionate about defending Russia. Okay, meanwhile, senators are calling for Ukraine's NATO membership to be put on the table at next week's summit. I don't know that anything's going to come from that. But so this is Senator Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire, co-chair of the Senate NATO Observer Group. She made one of the strongest arguments for deepening Ukraine's role in the alliance. They have the largest army in Europe. They have the most experienced army in Europe at this point. We're developing cutting-edge countermeasures based on Ukraine's real-time experience against Russian systems, she said. But frankly, that's not going to really matter coming from her or anyone in her party. The burden's on my party. The burden's on the Republicans to actually step up and support Ukraine like they should be. Now, Republican Senator Jim Rich, who's also on the committee, echoed Shaheen's urgency, describing Putin's actions as self-defeating. The mistake he's made actually have done a lot to strengthen NATO, not the least of which is adding 2 new members. That's Finland and Sweden. So it's really like she can say this all she wants, but it'll kind of fall on deaf ears. It's when Republicans start pushing on it in a meaningful way that Trump will have to listen to members of his own party, but they're just not willing to, at this point, most of them are not willing to step up and do that. The U.S. Senate delays Russian sanctions against Iran-Israel conflict, or as the Iran-Israel conflict escalates, and focuses the shift to Trump's tax bill and potential military engagement. Senator Graham again said Iran is center stage, but we haven't forgotten about Russia or Ukraine. But okay, that's just where we are. And then finally, I saw this. I thought this was an interesting story, and we're going to end with this. Daniel Ek, founder or co-founder and chief executive of Spotify, has invested 600 million euros in a German defense startup, Helsing, a company that supplies strike drones to Ukraine. Helsing has sold thousands of strike drones produced in its facility in southern Germany to Ukraine. It has also secured contracts for the UK, Germany, and Sweden. He said, quote, "There's enormous realization that it's really now AI, mass, and autonomy that's driving the new battlefield." He's right. That's exactly right. We can't underestimate the implications of that for this conflict in Ukraine or really any conflict going forward. So that's who we're talking about, co-founder of Spotify. By the way, I just want to put this out there. About a third of you are new to my channel since about March, something like that. Maybe February, April, March, something like that. I think it's March. And so I don't want you to be unaware. If you just type in Professor Gerdes Spotify and click on the first thing that pops up, you can hear all of these on Spotify and listen to this as a podcast. And please do that instead of listening in a car. People have told me, yeah, I listen to you on YouTube on my way home in the car, and sometimes I get distracted. Don't do that. Please don't do that. But you can hear me on Spotify. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.